I wanted to follow up from that in asking, you know, do you think, and some of you have touched on this briefly, but I'd like to draw it out a bit more, do you think that there's a danger that in a time of austerity, it's easy to blame the other, whatever the other is? So be the other be immigrants, be the other be whatever, you know, LGBT people, whatever the other is. So that instead of having to reflect on what our government is doing, of whatever stripe or colour, that actually we blame that family down the road that are not very much like us, and that actually government reinforces that, and that parties like UKIP and all the groups like the EDL and Britain First absolutely in a time of austerity thrive because the other is seen as such a problem. Maria, would you start?
Interestingly, I think the government blames the other, but what I've seen, and of course this is just my feeling, is when we had the migrant and refugee crisis recently, what we've seen was an unprecedented outpour of solidarity and sympathy, and I think that surprised everyone. So what this leads me is to this idea, blaming the other is traditionally something that is linked to the idea of the nation state. You know, the nation state operates divisions between us and them. You always need to have another in order to ascertain the us and make sure the us is protected from the other. So that's part of our history. But it's been surprising for me in a time of austerity and, you know, over the past few months, that there has been this outpour of solidarity, and I wonder where this is the time for a change in the debate on the migrant or the asylum seeker or the refugee as this alien, as this threatening other that comes, the idea of the bogan asylum seeker, which was very popular in the 1990s. So actually, I think we are in a time of change. I'm quite positive, I'm quite a positive person. So it is easy to blame the other. Governments do it traditionally, have always done it. But I think we might be at a time of change. Something is happening, I'm not sure what.
Something stirring, do you agree?
There's something stirring, subterranean.
Up to a point. I mean, I think you're right. I mean, I think certainly there was a bit of a sea change with, and particularly some of the visual images of Syrian refugees and that little boy on the shore, which really shocked people. I mean, it is extraordinary actually how one photo can have an impact that I don't know how many words or figures or ever statistics, you know, don't have. But I mean, I have read somewhere, I think, that in terms of public opinion polls already, you know, there's a big bit of a shift back again. Yeah. I mean, I think there isn't one single public opinion. I think that well of solidarity is still there among some people, and so there are people who are happy to take refugees and asylum seekers into their homes, and those people will continue to do so. Yeah. But I think there is also quite a large number of people who do blame the immigrant or asylum-seeking other for problems they see around them. And then also, I think it's not just about the other as the stranger from outside, but I think increasingly, and it's been happening for a while, that the kind of language used by government about people on benefits is what I've called actually in my work on poverty, a language of othering. And it's treating people in poverty as the other. And we see it with the whole strivers versus skivers language, and all the hatred actually that's been generated against disabled people who are seen as, you know, they're not really disabled, they should be in work. And that, I mean, again, it's not everybody, but I do think it's gradually got worse because politicians of my party as well, and I blame the last Labour government for this as well as the current, and the last coalition government as well as the current government, have talked about people on benefit as the other, you know, as inhabiting a dependency culture, like Tony Blair talked about languishing on benefit, yeah. And that all is a kind of drip, drip, drip. And so then when times are bad, it's very easy, people who are perhaps not on great, or on sort of moderate incomes, feel pretty insecure, increasingly insecure labour market. And when people feel insecure, then they want to try and blame someone else, turn on someone else, and it's people who are even worse off than they are, even worse position, that they tend to turn on rather than the better off. There was a brief moment, I think, during the global crisis when actually, for once, it was the rich who were being blamed, or at least the bankers and so forth. But that's all gone terribly quiet now. The bankers have got away with it. And they're not the ones who are paying the price of the recession, it's the people at the bottom. And I mean, we'll perhaps talk a bit more about this, but I mean, I very much like what Maria was saying about trying to encourage a grassroots culture of human rights. And there are groups like ATD Fourth World who encourage people in poverty to think about poverty as a human rights issue and encourage them to speak out. And I think in doing that, it helps overcome some of this othering, because it emphasises what people in poverty have in common with the rest of society, rather than how they're different. And therefore, I think the sort of language of human rights can be a very valuable mobilising language. And we've seen this in the United States, where there's a Poor People Economic and Human Rights campaign, and people have been marched, under the banner of economic human rights, standing up to be counted as poor, which on the whole people don't, people aren't proud to be poor. You may be proud to be gay, you may be proud to be black, you may be proud to be, but you're not proud to be poor by and large. And we have to change that. I'm not saying that because people don't want, people want to be something other than poor. But human rights, I think, gives that sort of language, even if the government itself doesn't recognise it in response. So yes, I think there are all sorts of, I've only talked about some aspects of othering that's going on, but it certainly, I think, helps divert attention from what the government's doing when you can turn on your fellow citizens and fellow members of society.
Ed?
We've not long had the anniversary of Magna Carta, and one of the things in there is the right of the individual to petition. And it was in a discussion on this in Westminster Hall, the Speaker's office at the House of Commons had facilitated. And the point was made, and it really struck me, that in the age of social media, actually, Parliament has not long enacted a bill whereby the petitions that get discussed are the ones signed by the most. And the point was made that often they're the issues that don't need discussion. It's the one signed by the fewest that actually identifies the extreme problems, because they're not the sexy issues. I was in the refugee camps in Belgrade in Serbia, a country troubled by the 100th anniversary of World War I, and still live scarred by massive refugee issues resulting from the Balkan and Yugoslav wars. I met a kid there, he was 12, and it had taken him, and this was at the peak of photos on the front page which you referred to, and it had taken him 12 months to walk from Lebanon to Belgrade, and he had walked, and he's 12 at the point which I saw him. And it just made me realise, and blindingly obvious, that it's taken 12 months, therefore, for it to make our news in a way that was mainstream. But in fact, that just made me realise that actually the problem in 12 months' time is probably occurring right now, that actually we're just addressing it in a sort of deferred timeline. I'm not sure I could ever find myself being enthusiastic about the move to greater engagement in the Syrian war, and I just thought, actually, is the result of the last night's vote, the vote the night before, going to be that actually in 18 months' time, a currently 10-year-old boy will walk into Belgrade again and say, where's the refugee camp? And because Serbia is so scarred, they have a phenomenal, astonishing, bizarre support structure for refugees, where they welcome, include, they give them tents, they give them health checks, they give them shoes, rucksacks, and it's amazing. A culture which we would not recognise, either by our stereotype of them or our experience of our own migrants. But, so the other, I just think it's other until it washes up on our shores, and then we're puzzled. We haven't made the connection with either the deferred timeline or our actions.